and then they just flip them back. You get a bunch of guys would just have to jump on the tail and pull it back
Pull it
down.
back in. Did
You
it?
have to untangle the cable and push the plane by hand up forward or to park it. Sometimes if it was badly damaged, we'd just push it right over the side.
They didn't come back with bombs, did they?
Do what?
Did they have bombs on them?
On occasion, we had more than not so much bombs as we had. We had it a couple times with bombs that hung up.
Right.
We had one time, I remember, it hung up. It was just hanging by the cord that, the electric cord that charged them. And that's all, and the bomb was hanging down below the plane, so everybody thought, well, boy, when that guy comes down,
Yeah.
that's going to hit on the nose, will set that bomb off,
Right.
So they didn't know whether to let it come back aboard or not. And there was a lot of discussion as whether the guys just bail out and leave it. So
Right.
anyway, they let him come back in. And the idea being that the bomb, in order to be charged, would have to, the end would have to hit, and then there's a certain amount of time they would have from the time that end point is broken until it would explode.
Oh.
Because normally you let the plane, when the plane is up at 10,000 feet and it drops the bomb, it takes a few seconds for the bomb to get down to the ground. So they figured they had enough time to get it over the side if it happened. So it come down and bang, bang, bang. I don't know.
It hit the deck?
Yeah.
Oh.
And the plane landed safely, and the ordnance men, they ran like crazy. They grabbed it and threw it over the side. And we're about
Who's lucky gets
we were
that
about
job?
100 yards past it when she blew it.
Really?
Yeah, it was that close.
Did they ever have to
Yeah.
push them, planes that crashed over the side that
Yeah,
couldn't
on
repair?
occasion. Well, and you had no time. Like you'd have planes coming in from a mission. Their gasoline is all gone,
Yeah.
and so they can't fly around up there for an hour while you repair the deck or anything. So if there's a plane crash into the barriers, and even if the barriers couldn't be repaired, usually you'd have one or two anyway. So they'd leave the broken one alone and get the one or two in position, because they might have 15 or 20 airplanes that have to be landed, and you just couldn't wait for.
Push it over the side?
Yeah.
Would they have elevators that took them down below, or were they always
We had
parked
two
up on the deck?
elevators, one in front and one near the front and one near the back. Yeah. Yeah, but you couldn't. So you had to park them up forward of the barriers, and until your group got in, and then you'd lower them into the hangar deck. Sometimes, if there were time differences between the groups, like you might have 20 planes coming in, and then there's a time lapse of a half hour before there's another group coming in. Well, if you had that time, then you'd take them below in the elevators. The ones we parked forward, we'd back up to the elevators and take them down to the hangar deck to clear enough space up forward for the next group to come in. Because we operated, I don't know whether it shows in here, one of the magazines I had a picture of some other escort carriers that were similar to these. And when you operated with them, we operated with like 40, we had 42 aircraft, which is a lot for an escort carrier. Most of them had about 25 to 30 aircraft.
Wow.
And so that, but it depends on what the size is and what type of aircraft it is, whether their wings fold or don't fold and things like that.
I thought all the wings folded.
No.
No.
SPDs didn't. And most of them did, but not all of them. And so they would, if you had that many aircraft, why, you didn't have a whole lot of extra space, So they had to get, and they didn't all go off at the same time, different missions. And you might be launching a flight of bombers at one point, and might be just launching 4 or 5 fighters just for combat air patrol over the task group. And then you would have no more launch on them we started out in the morning. That was the first flight that went off, was a combat air patrol. And we had to get up at 4:15, 4:30 to get them off at dawn. If you had first light, that's when they went.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were up for 4 hours, just circling the task group. And you had to be ready to bring them in at about 3.5 hours, because you had to allow at least some time for them to come down. Well, at one time, depending on what kind of group you were with, you might have to do the second launch as well. So you rotated. Another carrier, like we had 4 carriers in the task group. One of the other carriers would take over when these guys came in at around 10 o'clock. And then another group from another one, and they rotated all day. So you always had 4 planes circling the air group,
Right.
or circling the carriers, but we were taking turns doing it. So on my carrier, we might send the first group off, and then we'd secure, maybe have time for breakfast maybe, but then depending on what the missions were for that day, you'd have fighters and bombers going off, and might be launching, 10 fighters and 10 bombers. And so those go off and you secure from that. And about that time, the combat air control is coming back in. You land that group, get them repositioned, and your next flight might be in the afternoon where you've got another group of bombers, another group of fighters going off, and those are up. By the time you get through getting everybody aboard, why, it's almost 10 o'clock at night. By the time you get everything secured, they're usually in before dawn, before dark, because nighttime operations on a carrier are terrible. And
So you didn't try to land anybody at night?
on occasion, but not that they would like to, because somebody got caught up in the air. Or we had one before we left Pearl Harbor. They had to go through night landing operations, and they have they were
Like
not
a
allowed-
practice thing or something?
Yeah, the qualifying thing. They had to. You have across the flight deck of a carrier 3 positions where they have lights about the size of a pencil that are angled back to where the plane would be coming in on the glide. And it defines on the front, the middle, and the back of the landing area on the carrier. But you can hardly see it. And I mean, you have to be almost in line with it in order to see them. They're very bright light, but you have to be right in line. And of course, the idea is that a submarine, which was the big concern, would not be able to see it.
Okay.
So they had to qualify with those light conditions, and it got down to where a couple of guys took so many Larry buffs they just couldn't do it. And they still didn't want to turn the lights on.
Any brighter?
Yeah. So they finally did turn the lights on for a couple of minutes to get the last couple of planes in, but it was so pretty hectic, really. But and as far as a real situation, we had some that were getting pretty close to dark, but there was still enough light to land.
So you'd be working all day long, basically?
Yeah, we got up at 4:30, 4:15, 4:30, somewhere in there. And we didn't get the first air patrol every day. We'd maybe have it every 3rd day, 4th day. And then, and that would vary depending on what other missions were going to go on that day. And then we would usually we get through that. Then you have to get your equipment ready for the next group, and they would tell you what your next group is going to be. You're going to have 10 bombers and 10 fighters, or 6 bombers and 4 fighters, or whatever it's going to be.